Hey everybody, last review lesson in Unit 9. We're going to go on to new stuff next week. And this is probably going to be the quickest and easiest review lesson of all, I would hope anyway. It's this completing the square business, which we've reviewed twice now already. Rearranging this equation from what we call its general form into the standard form for a hyperbola. Okay, which looks a lot like standard form for an ellipse, the only difference being there's a minus in front of one of the fractions. So we begin the same way we would do if this turned out to be a circle and an ellipse. Graph the x terms together, graph the y terms together, but pay careful attention to the fact that there's a negative sign in front of that y squared term. Right? Then factor the 9 out of these terms. Right? If it's a circle equation, we're not going to have to do that. Most likely, the coefficients of the squared terms will be a 1. But we've got to factor this 9 out of this, leaving x squared. And when we factor the 9 out of the 54, or the minus 54, we get minus 6. Factoring doesn't produce this 9 here, right? It just produces what's to the left of my fingers there. Okay. And then the plus 9 comes from taking half of this number, half of negative 6 is negative 3, squaring the negative 3 becomes positive 9. Okay. But by writing plus 9 there, we have not just added 9 to the whole left side of this equation. We've added 9 times 9, right? Which is 81. That's why we add 81 to this side of the equation. Right? And why is the 55 there? Because we added 55 to both sides right at the very beginning. Okay, now you've got a minus 4y squared and a minus 40y. You want to factor out the minus in addition to the 4. Factor out a minus 4. Don't factor out a positive 4 and write negative y squared in here. It's not that that would be wrong, but that is probably going to lead you into a mistake in the next step or steps. Okay, so make sure you factor out the negative. And when you factor out a negative 4, this becomes positive. When you factor a negative out of a negative, that also becomes positive. Okay, so many of the mistakes I see my students make are just carelessness with positive and negative signs. Right? So then, where did that 25 come from? Not from the factoring. It came from then taking half of this positive 10, which is positive 5, squaring that, which is 25. But by writing plus 25, we have actually added a 25 times a negative 4. We've actually added a negative 100 to the left side, which is why we need to subtract 100 from this side. Okay? So that's a little bit different. For circles and ellipses, we're just always adding things to the right side. But in this case, we're going to be subtracting 100. Combine all these terms, gets you 36. Turn this trinomial into the square of a binomial. Same thing with this. Turn it into the square of that binomial. And then finally, divide everything by this constant number so that the right side of the equation turns into a 1. Until you do that, the equation is not in what we call standard form for the hyperbola. Same is true for ellipses. You got to turn that right side into a 1. You don't do that for circles. Okay? You don't do that for circles. For circles, the right side of the equation could be any number at all. It's going to be whatever the radius of the circle is squared. But on ellipses and hyperbolas, this should always end up being a 1. So you're not done until you divide everything by that number. Next example, not much different here at all, except that the x squared term happens to be negative, and the y squared terms are all positive. So again, factor the negative 16 out, and when you factor a negative out of a positive, that leaves a negative. Right? And if that confuses you at all, you can check that. What happens if you distribute this negative 16? Negative 16 times negative 4 is a positive 64. Okay? So when you factor the negative 16 out, what you get is what's there in red pen to the left of my finger. Where does this plus 4 come from? It comes from taking half of that negative 2, squaring it, getting positive 4. And by writing this positive 4, which is being multiplied by the negative 16, we are in effect adding not 4 to this side, but a negative 64, because 16 times 4 is 64. So we've added a negative 64 to this side, which is why we got to add a negative 64 to this side. Okay, factor the 25 out of these two terms, you get y squared plus 2y. Take half of that 2y, which is positive 1, square that. 1 squared is still 1. 1 times 25 is 25, so we have in effect added 25 to the left, add 25 to the right. Same final steps, combine these numbers, it's 400. Then divide everything by 400. Well, I skipped over turning this trinomial into the square of a binomial, turn this trinomial into the square of a binomial, and then divide everything by 400. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention up here and down there is these numbers, if you do all your arithmetic correctly, any problem you get from me in, on a quiz or a test in this course, these numbers are going to reduce very nicely to 1 over something. Okay? If they don't, go back and check your arithmetic. Something went wrong. 4 over 36 reduces to 1 over 9. 9 over 36, 1 over 4. And down here, 25 over 400 reduces to 1 over 16, and likewise this reduces. Now in this case, we got a negative here. Okay, you can leave the equation like this, it's fine. If you want to change the order of these terms so that the positive term is first, and so that you write y plus 1 squared over 16 first, and then minus x minus 2 squared over 25, that's fine, but you would not need to do that for me. What you do need to do is divide everything by 400 and then reduce these fractions. And there's your standard form for a hyperbola, okay? So obviously the homework assignment associated with this is going to have you do some of that, but, and here's a sneak peek, it's going to have you, here it says identify the equation as a circle, ellipse, or hyperbola, and rearrange the equation in the standard form. So this is going to have you doing all kinds here. And then on the next couple of pages, just some more practice with the graphs of circles, ellipses, hyperbolas from the equations. That'll be good stuff to review in anticipation of the partner quiz 9-9, which is technically this Friday's assignment. Okay? So again, please, if you have questions, if you're getting frustrated, if you're stuck on anything, I'm very confident that I can help you even via email if you just reach out with a question. Okay. Next week I'll have 2 brand new lessons, and we're going to have a Zoom class at the end of next week. Okay. But again, don't hesitate to reach out before then if you want to ask me a question. All right. Good luck, everybody. I hope you're all healthy and well. I wish you the best. We'll talk to you again soon.